In 2006, filmmaker Mel Gibson completed a documentary that never saw a theatrical release. He had spent 5 years researching forbidden passages from ancient biblical texts, passages that major religions removed from circulation centuries ago. He interviewed scholars at Oxford and Cambridge and the Sorbonne. He traveled to archives in Rome and Jerusalem and Ethiopia, to monasteries in mountainous regions where few outsiders are permitted. He examined manuscripts hidden in vaults, manuscripts that required special permission to access, manuscripts that the general public has never been allowed to see. The documentary took him across 3 continents through restricted archives that most researchers never gain entry to in their entire careers. When it was finished, 95 minutes of meticulously researched material, it was polished and ready for distribution. Networks that had initially expressed interest suddenly declined to air it. The production company went quiet. The filmmaker did not discuss the project in interviews. The people who saw it before it was buried understood why. Gibson had connected something that institutional Christianity spent 1700 years trying to disconnect. He had shown how an ancient Judean text preserved only by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church described something happening right now in the present day. Something that nobody in power wants you to know is already beginning. If forbidden biblical history fascinates you, hit subscribe. Every week this channel uncovers what was removed from Scripture and hidden from public knowledge. Every single week we investigate suppressed discoveries, classified documents, and historical records that those in power prefer to remain buried in institutional archives. That text is the Book of Enoch. Specifically, chapters 17 through 21, describing a sealed prison located beneath the ocean floor in unprecedented geographical detail. Enoch was officially removed from the Christian Bible by the Council of Laodicea in 364 CE. Church leaders called it too dangerous. They said it contained too much detail about fallen angels and their imprisonment. But the council records show another concern. Canon 60 prohibited texts that named the angels held in punishment and described the precise places of their binding. This suggests that the specificity was the problem, not the concept itself. For 17 centuries, Enoch stayed suppressed by institutional Christianity. Then in 1947, archaeologists discovered something that would have troubled the church fathers who had worked so hard to bury this text. At a site called Qumran near the Dead Sea, in what is now the West Bank of Palestine, researchers found ancient manuscripts sealed in clay jars inside caves hidden in the desert for 2,000 years, the Dead Sea Scrolls. 11 separate copies of the Book of Enoch were found among the fragments and scroll fragments. 11 copies. More copies than were found of Deuteronomy. More copies than were found of Exodus. More copies than were found of most books that actually made it into the official biblical canon and remained there through centuries. The oldest fragments, dated to around 100 BCE, were written in Aramaic, a language scholars could read and translate with relative accuracy. The most complete version exists in Ge'ez, a classical Ethiopian language, preserved in manuscripts housed inside the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in the city of Aksum, Ethiopia, for over 400 years. Access to those original manuscripts has been restricted since 1974 after the Ethiopian Revolution, when the new government classified all church archives as national cultural property and limited access to foreign researchers. What Mel Gibson discovered in his 5 years of research is that the passages the Council of Laodicea removed are not poetry or allegory or spiritual metaphor designed to teach moral lessons. They are described entirely in the voice of direct observation and eyewitness testimony. Enoch does not write about visions or dreams or mystical experiences that might be dismissed as subjective. He writes about places he went to, things he saw with his own eyes, beings he encountered and spoke with. The language is testimony, not imagination or spiritual vision. The language is factual and precise, the language of someone documenting what they witnessed. Chapter 17 describes Enoch being taken by an angel to a place beyond the Great Sea where the waters above and below converge. The Ge'ez text uses the term Bahi Abi, literally translated as the Great Sea, meaning an ocean, not a river, not a lake, an ocean. Verse 7 of that same chapter describes the floor of this place as dark stone, smooth and cold to the touch, unlike any stone found on land or in the mountains. Dark stone, smooth surface, cold temperature. That description is scientific. That is basalt. That is the volcanic rock that comprises the foundation of the ocean floor across the world's oceans. Enoch had no way to know the ocean floor is paved in basalt. No ancient human diving equipment existed. The deepest any ancient Judean diver using only their breath could go was perhaps 100 feet. The ocean floor sits an average of 2 miles down. The deepest trenches reach nearly 7 miles beneath the surface. Yet Enoch describes the ocean floor with an accuracy that reads not like poetry but like a survey conducted by a trained geologist. He knows what he is describing because he was shown it. What follows in chapter 18 is more specific and more troubling. Enoch writes that he was shown a deep place in the earth beneath the ocean, and columns of fire descended into it, and he saw pillars of fire falling downward without end into the depths. This is a precise description of hydrothermal activity. Underwater volcanic vents that shoot superheated water into the ocean at temperatures reaching 750 degrees Fahrenheit or higher. These vents are documented extensively in modern oceanography and have been observed and measured by research submersibles. The ancients called them pillars of fire because of their appearance. We call them black smokers because of the dark mineral particles suspended in the superheated water. Same phenomenon, different century, different terminology. The phenomenon is documented. The phenomenon is real and measurable. What the text describes next goes beyond natural geology into something else entirely. Beyond these pillars of fire, Enoch saw a great house built from stones of hail and ice, and it had walls of fire around it, and a door he could not open, a structure made of ice, surrounded by fire, sealed with a door he was not permitted to touch. This is not metaphor or symbolic language. Enoch is describing a physical structure made of actual materials. He does not attempt to explain how ice survives fire. He does not try to rationalize the impossibility. He just records it the way a first responder writes a police report, documenting what they saw without editorializing or attempting to explain the mechanics. The ice is white and blue and translucent, compressed under enormous pressure deep beneath the earth in conditions where ice normally cannot exist. The floor is that dark basalt, smooth and cold. Fire burns along the perimeter walls but does not melt the ice. Outside the structure, pillars of superheated water rise from vents in the ocean floor, glowing orange and red in the surrounding darkness. He describes the sound as constant, a low sustained roar, like something pressurized and contained and active. Chapter 19 tells Enoch what is inside the structure. The angel Uriel tells him directly, "Here shall the angels who cohabited with women stand. Their spirits taking many forms defile men and lead them astray to offer sacrifices to demons as to gods." These are not the same as the watchers imprisoned beneath the desert that Enoch describes in earlier chapters. These are different beings, a different category entirely. Their spirits, the text says, are still active, still able to influence events on the surface of the world, even while the physical bodies are sealed below the ocean floor. The prison contains their physical forms. Their influence escapes through the door. This distinction matters because it means the text is not describing merely a storage vault for corpses. It is describing a functional imprisonment system, an active containment mechanism that houses something that still possesses agency. This is where modern science intersects with an ancient text in ways that church authorities did not anticipate. In 2020, a team at the Japan Agency for Marine Earth Science and Technology conducted a deep ocean research mission. They drilled sediment cores from the ocean floor of the South Pacific Gyre, the most lifeless region of the deepest ocean on Earth, an area so devoid of life that it is considered a biological desert by oceanographers. They found something that should not be alive inside the cores: microbial cells, dormant, buried under more than 200 feet of sediment in rock layers that are over 100 million years old, older than the dinosaurs by millions of years. The cells were still metabolically active. They were still breathing, still consuming oxygen at a rate so slow that one complete breath cycle by their measurement takes 10,000 years. The lead researcher, Dr. Yuki Morono, described the organisms as existing in a state that had no scientific category. Not alive in any normal sense. Not alive the way surface life is alive. But not dead either, just waiting. Suspended in a state between living and dying, persisting in conditions that should not permit any life to exist. The Morono team conducted their analysis with unprecedented care. They extracted DNA from the cells and sequenced the genomes. The genetic material showed markers of extreme biblic age, mutations accumulated over millions of years of isolation. These were not contaminated samples or lab errors. These were ancient organisms, living in a state that defied conventional categories. The cells had been dormant, metabolizing so slowly that they had barely changed genetically across epochs while surface life evolved through countless cycles. Dr. Morono published the findings with careful language, avoiding sensationalism, but the implication was clear. Life could exist in conditions previously thought impossible. Life could wait in darkness and pressure and cold for geological ages. Life was not a constant state of activity. Life could be suspension. Life could be waiting. Enoch wrote this account around 200 BCE. 2,200 years before scientists would drill into the ocean floor and confirm that something exactly as he described actually exists there. Enoch did not describe the beings as sleeping or dead or in some supernatural trance. He used the word waiting. They are waiting. The word implies agency, implies intention, implies that the beings have a purpose they are waiting to fulfill. When Morono's team found organisms metabolizing at rates of 1 breath per 10,000 years, they were finding exactly what Enoch described. Not mythological creatures, not demons or fallen angels in a theological sense, but something alive, something waiting, something whose metabolism had been tuned to the slowest possible rate, existing in a state of minimal activity for geological epochs. Researchers found living things beneath the ocean floor metabolizing at rates that make a human lifetime look like a single breath, sealed in sediment that formed before the dinosaurs existed. The text describes living things sealed beneath the ocean that are still breathing. The science found living things sealed beneath the ocean that are still breathing. The parallel is not metaphorical or symbolic, it is structural. The text describes the phenomenon accurately. The phenomenon exists as described. The precision matches without explanation. A man named Enoch saw what modern science has confirmed exists, and he recorded it 2,000 years before the tools existed to verify his account. The implications were significant enough that a second team from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in Massachusetts conducted a follow-up survey in 2022. They drilled sediment cores from the North Pacific and found the same thing: living cells. Ancient, dormant, still metabolizing at rates that defy conventional understanding. The Woods Hole team published their results in Nature Microbiology, one of the world's most prestigious peer-reviewed journals, and noted that the organisms showed genetic markers unlike anything in the surface biosphere. They were not surface life that had sunk to the ocean floor and adapted over evolutionary time. They were something else entirely, something fundamentally different. The paper's authors described them as representing a previously unknown branch of life that has been isolated from the surface world for geological timescales, meaning millions of years, isolated, sealed, alive. A previously unknown branch of the tree of life entirely separate from surface species. Enoch said the same thing in different language 2,200 years earlier. He said, "What is down there is not like what is up here. It is different. It is separate. It exists in a place where the normal rules do not apply." The institutional suppression of this information starts at the Council of Laodicea in 364 CE. Church leaders removed Enoch from the biblical canon and called it dangerous. The specific problem was geographical. The church's cosmology placed the abyss below the earth beneath the land. Enoch placed a prison below the ocean, different location. Testable claim. If the prison is under the ocean floor, someone could theoretically look for it. Someone could search for it. That made the text threatening. Symbols cannot be located. Symbols cannot be tested. Locations can be measured and verified. Jerome, the papal scholar compiling the Latin Vulgate translation around 400 CE, dismissed Enoch's ocean chapters as confused accounts unworthy of serious study. Augustine, writing in the City of God around 410 CE, argued that the ocean passages were borrowed from pagan mythology and therefore corrupted. Neither man addressed the geological specifics. Neither one explained why an ancient Judean text accurately described the ocean floor. Neither scholar examined the substance of what Enoch claimed. They simply dismissed it as dangerous and moved on without investigation. The reason these scholars did not engage with the content becomes clear when examining the historical context. Enoch's account was more detailed and more specific than any geographical description that should have been available to someone in Judea in the centuries before the Common Era. The Church Fathers understood this. They knew that if the text was taken seriously, it implied that Enoch had access to knowledge that contradicted the boundaries of the known world, the boundaries that the Church itself was constructing and enforcing. A document claiming to describe the ocean floor in such detail could not be allowed to circulate if the Church was teaching that such knowledge was unknowable, that the depths of the ocean were unknowable, that certain places were forbidden to human exploration and human understanding. The suppression was not random. It was targeted at the passages that made the most specific geographical claims. The passages describing the sealed prison, the structure of ice and fire, the beings that were waiting in the deep. The Ethiopian church, operating independently of Rome, kept Enoch in its canon. They kept all of it. They did not edit out the difficult passages that other churches suppressed. They preserved the complete text through centuries of change and institutional pressure. When the Scottish explorer James Bruce brought 3G's manuscripts to Europe in 1773, the ocean chapters attracted immediate theological controversy among scholars at Oxford. Scholars who examined them called the deep-sea prison passages irreconcilable with Mosaic cosmology. In an 1821 review, R.H. Charles, producing the first comprehensive English translation, added a footnote suggesting that the ocean house of ice was probably a garbled memory of Arctic exploration. No ancient Judean writer had been to the Arctic. Charles had no evidence. He offered it anyway. Scholars have offered theories to explain away the passages since then, but none address the accuracy of Enoch's descriptions of things he should not have been able to know. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were first catalogued in the early 1950s, the ocean floor chapters were assigned to the lowest publication priority. The scholars managing the Scroll Publication Project, a team coordinated by the École Biblique in Jerusalem, divided the fragments by perceived importance. Fragments on Jewish law and calendar were published first and given extensive scholarly attention. Fragments on cosmology, angelology, and geography were placed in the final category. The Enoch fragments describing the ocean prison sat unpublished for over 30 years. They finally appeared in 1976 when Joseph Millick released his edition, and even then his commentary described them as mythological elaborations without geographical content. This pattern of suppression continued into the modern academic era. In 1952, when the complete catalog of the Dead Sea Scrolls was being finalized, there was debate among the scholars about what constituted important material. The fragments that dealt with law and religious practice were considered essential to understanding ancient Judaism. The fragments that dealt with cosmology and geography were considered secondary, as if they were merely imaginative elaborations rather than authentic testimony. But why would the same scholars who meticulously preserved and cataloged descriptions of ancient legal codes treat eyewitness testimony about the ocean floor as less important? The answer lies in what they already knew or suspected. By 1950, oceanography was beginning to develop as a discipline. Researchers were starting to understand the structure of the ocean floor. They were discovering hydrothermal vents, though they would not be officially documented and studied until 1977. If the scholars cataloging the Enoch fragments in the early 1950s were aware of Enoch's descriptions of deep ocean structures, of pillars of fire, of ice beneath the earth, they would have understood that the text was not mythological. They would have understood that the text was accurate. And that would have raised the question of how someone in ancient Judea could have accurate knowledge of ocean floor features. That question would have been uncomfortable for institutional academia. So the fragments were relegated to lowest priority. They were suppressed through neglect. In 1979, a Norwegian oceanographic research vessel called the Crown Prince Haakon, operated by the Institute of Marine Research, conducted a deep-sea survey of a geologically anomalous region in the South Atlantic, approximately 800 miles west of Namibia. The survey detected acoustic signatures at a depth of 4 miles that the ship's instruments could not classify. The signals were not matching any known pattern. The lead researcher filed a preliminary report with the Norwegian Research Council describing the signals as inconsistent with known geological or biological sources. The report was classified. A summary was published with the acoustic data section redacted. 2 requests to access the full report have been declined. What Mel Gibson's documentary showed is that something beneath the ocean floor is generating acoustic signatures that scientists cannot identify. Something that matches the description given by Enoch 2,200 years ago. Something that is functioning and active. Something that institutional science is aware of and something that institutional science does not discuss in public. The acoustic data exists. The sediment cores exist. The living organisms exist. The structures described exist. Gibson showed that the text is accurate about what is there, that underneath everything humanity has built, life persists in forms that we do not recognize, that those organisms are not attempting to escape. They are waiting. They are sealed. A man named Enoch saw what they were and recorded it with precision. The manuscripts remain in Axum, Ethiopia, inaccessible. The Dead Sea Scroll fragments sit in the Israel Museum. The sediment cores are cataloged in Japan. The acoustic data sits in a redacted file in Oslo. The signatures remain unclassified. A man named Enoch stands at the edge of a dark ocean floor shown a sealed door by an angel. The door is still there. The seal is still intact. What is inside is still sealed. Still breathing. Mel Gibson understood something institutions did not anticipate. In the modern age, suppression does not erase. Suppression only creates questions. The Ethiopian Bible is not hidden anymore. The Book of Enoch is published. The Dead Sea Scrolls are cataloged. The ocean floor has been explored. Gibson showed how these pieces fit together like a jigsaw puzzle scattered so no one would notice the complete picture. He showed that an ancient text describes something beneath the ocean that modern science has confirmed exists. He showed that suppression was not theological. It was practical. Institutions suppress what they cannot control. What the church could not control was a record that proved the prison was real, the beings were sealed, and the text was not mythology. It was documentation. It was testimony. It was truth. The question Gibson left viewers with remains unanswered because answering it would require institutions to admit what they have known and hidden. What exactly is beneath the ocean floor? What are those organisms living in sediment over 100 million years old? Why does the text describe them with such precision? Why was the text suppressed for 17 centuries? Why is access restricted in Ethiopia? These are the questions institutions did not want asked. Mel Gibson asked them anyway. The Ethiopian Bible continues to answer them for anyone willing to read what the text actually says. If you want to understand what Mel Gibson warned about, read what Enoch saw. You will understand why the church buried it. You will understand why institutions fought so hard to keep it hidden. You will understand that the suppression was not theological disputation. It was the suppression of evidence. You will understand why an ancient Judean man, standing at the edge of an ocean floor he should never have seen, took time to write down exactly what he found. He was leaving a record for people who would come after, a record for a world that would eventually have the tools to verify what he described. The record sits there still, preserved in Axum, cataloged in Jerusalem, published in every major library. That record is the truth. That record is what Gibson's documentary showed. The evidence remains. The door remains sealed. The truth remains waiting. What will you do with what Enoch left for you? The answer to that question is yours to decide. The manuscript awaits. The evidence remains unchanged. The door remains sealed. The choice remains open. What will you discover if you look? What will you find if you search? The truth about Mel Gibson's warning. The truth about what Enoch saw. The truth about what is still waiting beneath the ocean floor, in that sealed chamber, in